Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear participants. Welcome to this session of textual study of the Quran. We are studying Surah Baqarah since the last session, and you would be remembering that in the last session we had gone through the first 39 verses of this surah. This is a Medinan surah, and the pattern of our study was that in our first step we look at the addressees of the surah, and in particular the section that we are studying. So we had already discussed this, that as far as the surah as a whole is concerned, its addressees are the Jews of the times of the Prophet, and later on in the surah, Muslims or the believers are also addressed when they are instituted as a new ummah in place of the Israelites. And as far as some of the secondary addressees are concerned, we also have the Prophet being addressed, we also have the idolaters of Medina being addressed. So we have to understand this as at the onset, I would say, that as far as the addressees of a surah are concerned, there are primary addressees and there are secondary addressees, and basically it is the primary addressees which have to be looked into vis-a-vis the structure of the surah and how it actually at times departs to other secondary addressees. So as far as Surah Baqarah is concerned, at the moment, in these first 39 verses, we do not find the Jews being addressed, and this is a very special style of the Quran in which certain indirect premises are mentioned, they are narrated as a story, as an anecdote, and then suddenly in the background, once this is complete, the address is shifted directly to the direct addressees. And you'll find in the 40th verse of this surah, the Jews being addressed directly by the words Ya Bani Israel, which is, O Israelites. But in the first 39 surahs, we find that as far as the addressees are concerned, we started off in the first section by seeing that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is addressed, and he is actually given certain directions. He is told at how his addressees would behave, and also he was told at how there are certain groups within his addressees who have decided to deny the message of the book that he is being presenting. And then there are others among them who are like the hypocrites, who are like people who would have their own say. They would like a compromise between their religion and the religion of Islam, and they wanted some settlement to take place, and we find them they being mentioned as well. And once this mention is finished, we find that the address of the Quran shifts to the idolaters stationed in Medina. And remember, these idolaters, they belong to the Aus and Khazraj tribes. These tribes were settled in Medina. They were the idolaters. Their leaders, Sa'd bin Ubadah and Sa'd bin Mu'az, they had accepted Islam very earlier on, and gradually many people of these tribes also accepted faith. But as I said, this is not the case with each and every one of these tribes. So they are also addressed. And we had also seen that the scheme of this address, the way we would be looking at it, is that since the most important element in interpreting the Quran is to find out that who is being addressed and who is the addressee and who is the speaker or the addresser, so we will start off every section of study of the Quran by pointing out the addressees through a color scheme. So if you would be remembering, we had used this yellow color scheme for the first 20 verses of this surah, and these first 20 verses they are colored in yellow, and they actually tell us that it is the Prophet who is addressed here. He is assured, he's given assurance in some matters, and at the same time he is also informed of the nature of the denial of his addressees and the way he would encounter them in his future endeavors. And then from verse 20 onwards, which is from verse 21 and right up to verse 39, we had seen that the addressees had shifted to the idolaters of Medina, and because of the fact that they were also being influenced by the Jews. So remember, this is also a very important thing that we have to understand, that this change in addressee is not just haphazard. It has its own background in philosophy. So consider the Almighty starting off the surah by addressing the Prophet and also informing him of the machinations of the Jews and the way they would react to his preaching. And then because these Jews were also, they were overbearing, they were overpowering the idolaters who were stationed in Medina. So what happened is that whilst addressing the Jews, there is a tilt, there's a slant towards these idolaters, as if informing them that, remember, these are the Jews who have decided to deny, and there is another category among them who is trying to strike a compromise. But as far as you are concerned, why do you follow these Jews in this denial? You should remember that as far as the Prophet is concerned, he has spent about 13 years in Mecca, and he's been addressing the idolaters and addressing your main beliefs. So once again, you see the connection is that because the Jews are indirectly discussed in this address to the Prophet, and because they were influencing the idolaters of Medina, so therefore now it is as if that divine orator has shifted to these idolaters, and it's telling them that, well, we're going to take care of these Jews in a while, but you look here, that see what you are doing and how you are behaving with your own self. So this is a brief summary of what we have already discussed in our last session, and I wanted to reconnect you so that we can now move on from there. Starting off, the first important thing is, remember that this surah begins with these huruf muqatta'at, or the abbreviated letters as they are called. And generally the notion here is that we do not know the meaning of these huruf muqatta'at, and they are from among the mutashabihat, and we just should not question them. And this meaning has found, I would say, preponderance in a lot of people, and they think that we should just read them and forget about their meaning. Well, we have to understand that as far as these letters are concerned, a very vast majority of the mufassirun, I would say a very vast majority, at least a very sizable majority, they understand that these are basically names of the surah. So Alif Lam Mim is the name of this surah. The next surah is Surah Al-Imran. That also starts with Alif Lam Mim. And we have 29 surahs in the Quran out of 114, which begin with these huruf muqatta'at, which means that each letter is spelled out separately. And they stand for a name of the surah. So Alif Lam Mim is the name of this surah. It is the name which is kept by God. Of course, we also have another name, which is Al-Baqarah. And Al-Baqarah is the name given to this surah by the Sahaba. And the way it came to be known as Baqarah is there is an incident of the cow which has been mentioned later in the surah. And the way that the Arabs and the Sahaba used to keep the names of the surahs would be that they would actually pick up some odd incident, something very catchy in the text, and then they would name the surah by that catchy incident. And so this is a very, something of a departure from how we would keep names. So generally, if I would write an article, of any person would write a book, the title of the book or the title of the article would always reflect the content of the book or the article. But this is not the case with the Quran. So when you read Surah Baqarah, you should not think that the whole surah is going to talk about the cow. No, that is not so. There's just one incident, and that too maybe in 4 or 5 verses out of a total of 286 verses. So you see, this was a very novel way of naming a surah. And you'll find this pattern continuing in the rest of the surahs of the Quran as well, that basically a catchphrase is taken, and by that catchphrase, the Arabs would name the surah. And also you'll find as a result that there was another practice amongst them, and that is a single surah would have multiple names. So Alif Lam Mim was the name given to the surah by the Almighty, and Al-Baqarah is the name given by the Sahaba. And if you study Hadith literature, you'll find other names of Surah Baqarah as well. And this is the case with other surahs as well. So this is another very novel and a very peculiar custom which was found in Arabia, that a single poem or a single composition would be remembered by different names. And this is no different in the case of the Quran. So the next question that might arise is that why is it that, not only why is it that, what exactly is the meaning of the word Alif Lam Mim? Because you see, names generally, they do have meanings, although there are many words or very many names about whose meaning we're not very sure of. But then there is this question that might arise in your minds that if this is the name of the surah, then what exactly is the wisdom of keeping such a name? So the answer to this question has been given by many people, but to me, the most convincing answer has been given by Ustaz Hamiduddin Farahi in his tafsir. And he has actually surmised and shown that these letters in ancient Arabia, they also connoted certain entities. And it is with reference to these entities that we find things being named. So, thus, for example, the word noon, would connote a fish. It meant a fish. And it would, whenever the word noon would be written, it would denote a fish. So you'll find this example to be absolutely true in the Quran, because Surah Noon wal Qalam is the 68th surah of the Quran, and it mentions the Prophet Jonah and how he was confined to the belly of a fish. And this surah, which is called Surah Noon wal Qalam, you'll find that the incident of Prophet Jonah is mentioned near the end, and it says, La takun ka sahib al-hut. The Prophet is addressed and said that do not be like the companion of the fish, referring to Jonah or Yunus. And of course, the surah starts off with Noon. And then Farahi has also shown that, look at the Surah Taha. So Toa or Toy in ancient Arabic would denote a serpent or a snake. And we find the mention of a snake, of course, the anecdote of Moses and the Pharaoh, in which the serpent figures right in that surah. Similarly, the word Alif would represent the Almighty God, or would represent Tawheed or oneness. And we find Alif Lam Mim right here in this surah being named so, and then we find Surah Al Imran also being named as Alif Lam Mim, and this is a similarity between the themes of these surahs as well. So whenever there is a similarity in the name, you'll find similarity in the contents as well, and so on and so forth. I mean, what we can say at the moment is that although we are not familiar that how many of the rest of the huruf muqatta'at they denote certain meanings, but it seems that if research is done and more time is spent on this issue, we might thrash out some of the other names or the meanings of other huruf muqatta'at. But this doesn't affect the message of the Quran, remember? So, I mean, even if we don't know why Surah Baqarah is named Alif Lam Mim, that wouldn't be of any consequence, because to not know the name of a meaning of a name is inconsequential. All that you need to know is what exactly is the surah all about. So this is a sort of a extra thing that a person could be curious about, that why is it that a surah is named so. So it's just a question of what exactly is the meaning of this name. Otherwise, what exactly are these huruf muqatta'at? You'll find out that they are names of the surahs, and the word Zalik al-Kitab or similarly other demonstrative pronouns, they show that they're referring to the name of the surah. So if you have any questions regarding this first part of this discussion that I just presented before you, that Alif Lam Mim is not among the huruf mutashabihat as is generally understood. It is the name of the surah, and this name has some significance, and we know that the letter Alif represents God's name, and similarly there is a significance and meaning of the word Lam and Mim as well. But as far as the rest of the surahs are concerned, this research is still lacking in that sense, that it needs to be found out at what exactly is the meaning of a lot of other surahs. As I said, there are 29 surahs which begin by various letters. So in case you have any questions regarding these abbreviated letters or huruf muqatta'at, please let me know now. Yeah.
How would they be distinguished from one another? If, for example, I quoted to somebody that have you read Surah Alif Lam Mim or Surah Alif Lam Ra, how would they be distinguished? Why were the same names applied to everybody, to more than one surah?
So you see, if you even see now, this is a very peculiar custom amongst the Arabs. They would call their children Abdullah, and there would be several Abdullahs in the family of a single person, and they would be called Abdullah 1 or Abdullah 2. Abdullah the first, Abdullah the second. So this is something which is a very common feature in ancient Arabia and even at times today. The way to distinguish these surahs would be that they would add something more to it. For example, they would say this is Alif Lam Mim Baqarah and this is Alif Lam Mim Al Imran. So they would add one more letter or one more word which would make that distinction visible, that we are talking about a certain surah. And although the commonality is between Alif Lam, but Alif Lam Mim Baqarah and Alif Lam Mim Al Imran, they sort of distinguish that, I'm talking about Baqarah or Al Imran. And perhaps this is the very reason that the Sahaba, they kept other names of the surah as well. It becomes understandable that why did they need to keep another name. And I think one of the reasons could be that had they not kept a name and two surahs having the same name as Alif Lam Mim, it would have been difficult for them to distinguish or to quote the surah or quote the name of the surah as you've just said.
Oh, I have a question,
okay.
sir. So point is that like Taha, you mentioned, and Yasin, people name the kids. They say, oh, these are names given to Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. I never see anywhere except the name of Surah Taha. If in Taha means serpent, I mean how would Allah Ta'ala name Surah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam Taha? And then Yasin also doesn't say Yasin or Quran Hakim. I don't think Allah Ta'ala is addressing Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam as a Yasin. So, but how does that come about?
So he's not addressing the Prophet at all. I mean, as I said, this is the name of the surah. I mean, this is an erroneous. I mean, as I said, this is. I mean, if they see that the name of a surah is Yasin, I mean, this is a very common phenomenon that people would just take that name and use it for their children or any other human being. It's just a common practice that Muslims have adopted.
But where did this come from?
I think it's just it's just a natural thing. I mean, it's just a natural phenomenon. I mean, it's like people thinking that, well, this is a good name, and if it's the name of a surah. And by the way, not all surahs are used as names for children, like Alif Lam Mim or Alif Lam Ra or Alif Lam Mim Ain Sin Qaf, the way we have several other surahs. Or Swad is another surah, Qaf is another surah. I think this is just one exception that you find Yasin being a name. Otherwise, I don't find any other abbreviated letter to be used as a name of a person. Yeah, Taha is another. Yes, you're right. Taha is another example. But as I said, this is just a natural custom. I mean, just a thing that has happened in our culture. It's nothing to be worried about.
Assalamu alaikum. So I have a question about what's the wisdom between having the first 20 verses addressing the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then you mentioned after 20 for the idolaters of Medina. Up until when? That's my first question. And where are the munafiqun addressed in there? And what is the wisdom of the order in which they're addressed? Thank you.
So I think we did this last time, that until verse 39 we find this address. I mean, the change in address occurred. Let me see. It occurred in verse 21. Yes, this change occurred in verse 21, and it goes right up to verse 39. And inshallah, in the next week, when we'll start off with verse 40, you'll find a direct address, Ya Bani Israel, which tells us that now the Jews are being addressed. So as far as the wisdom of this change of address is concerned, I was just talking about it. So remember, the first 20 verses indirectly referring to the Jews and their habits and the way that they're denying the Prophet or trying to strike a compromise. All this activity was also influencing another group of people who were also stationed in Medina, and they were the idolaters, the Aus and Khazraj. So once the Jews had been addressed, or exactly not being addressed, I can say that they were indirectly referred to by addressing the Prophet. So there came a point when perhaps they were also influencing the idolaters of Medina to come out in the open and deny the Prophet as well. So it is precisely for this reason that now the idolaters are addressed, and they are told that why do you follow these Jews in this denial? So it's like it's being connected because both of these addresses are found side by side within Medina. As far as the hypocrites are concerned, we are going to talk about it. I mean, because this is a point which relates to the explanation of the surah. So these are the points that we are going to discuss today. And did you have a third question?
No, thank you very much. That was all. Thank you. Jazakumullah khair.
Okay. Okay. You see, we're now going to concentrate on the first 5 verses. And as you can see that the next verses, or 6 or 7, they have been colored in a different color. There is a reason for that. I'm just going to describe that to you. But before that, let's look at this yellow part. First of all, you'll find that this is a sentence right after the first sentence which says, "This is the book of God, Zalik al-Kitab." And the fact that there is no doubt in it being the book of God, the Quran is asserting at the very beginning that this is the book that you are waiting for. So remember, the Jews and the Christians in their own scriptures, they were waiting for the last prophet to arrive, and they were waiting for the last book to arrive as a result also. Yet they are not addressed directly at this time. This is a very subtle part of the Quran in which the Quran states, this is the book of God, meaning that this is the book that you were waiting for. And there is no doubt that it is a book of God. It is being sent by the Almighty. And as you will see later on in the surah, later on in the Quran, that this is a statement which the Quran, which will corroborate itself and tell people that, well, when it is said that this is a book of God, then the reason that it is being said so is that there is no evolution of thought. You'll find that this is a divine discourse which is being given by the Almighty, and you'll not find any contradiction to it, contrary to human discourses which are marred with contradictions and conflicts. So this is the most I would say prominent litmus test which the Quran presents, but that is for later. But here, as the surah begins and you start to read the Quran, you'll find out that this is a statement of assertion. This is a statement of fact, which is given here at the very beginning, that there is no doubt in it being the book of God, and it is guidance for these God-fearing who are professing faith without observing, are diligent in their prayer, are spending for our cause from what we have given them, and who are believing in what was revealed to you and also in what was revealed before you, and have firm conviction in the hereafter. So look at these attributes which are being mentioned. The first attribute which is being mentioned is that this is a book for the God-fearing who are professing faith without observing. So the Arabic expression is yu'minuna bil ghaib, which means that they are professing faith without demanding to see what they are to believe in. So they are professing faith on the basis of arguments, on the basis of reasoning. So iman bil ghaib is the first thing. And remember, it has generally been translated or generally been understood to mean that, well, to blindly accept something. When we say, well, it's iman bil ghaib, people think it means that you just need to blindly accept whatever is being told to you. This is not the correct meaning of the verse. The Arabic construction, I'm not going to discuss that, but if I'm just going to pass by it and let you know that the meaning yu'minuna bil ghaib means to profess faith without seeing, which means on the basis of some reasoning you profess faith. Like, it's very much like the fact that you've not seen gravity, but you know that the force of gravity exists because there are several arguments in favor of it. You have not, when you see smoke coming out of some place, you don't go and investigate whether there's going to be fire there or not, because of course there's going to be fire. So the smoke is a sign enough that there's a fire far away, that from where the smoke is coming out. So in a very similar way, the first thing which is mentioned here is that they do not demand things to be seen by their eyes in order to believe. Now keep counting and you'll see that indirectly there is a slant given on the Jews. What did they say? The Jews said, Arina Allah jahratan. We are going to believe once we see God face to face. And in the background, the Quran has not yet addressed them, but it has addressed the believers and said that, look, they are not demanding things to be seen in order to believe in them. They are believing on the basis of arguments. They don't demand God to be seen. They think that God is there on the basis of arguments. So as you progress through these verses, you'll find that each and every attribute of the believers which is mentioned is basically a slant on the mannerisms and on the beliefs of the Jews. This is the first thing. The second is they are diligent in the prayer. You see, are diligent in the prayer, which means that they are very, very punctual in their prayer. They are very consistent in their prayer. And if you look at the Quran, you'll find something very contradictory found among the Jews. So in Surah Maryam, it is said that the Jews, Azar Salat, they had wasted away the prayer. They had forgotten the prayer, and they did not pray the way they were taught to pray. And all that that was left of it was just a partial posture of the prayer. And exactly, you see, the thing which is mentioned here is that they are diligent in the prayer. And then look at the next. It says they are spending for our cause from what we have given them. And in direct contrast, we find the Jews being addressed at several instances, and they would say, يَأْمُرُونَ النَّاسَ بِالْبُخْلِ, that they would ask people to be stingy because they themselves were stingy. And they wanted that no one should call them stingy. And the only way this could happen was if they could make other people stingy as well. So if there's no person who is going to spend and all people become stingy, so there would be nothing, there would be no one left to call them stingy. So the next, this attribute also tells us that basically the background is, once again, although they're not yet addressed, but in the background, the Jews are being, there's a slant, there's a definite slant, like a tangent going through them. And then it says that who are believing in what was revealed to you and also what was revealed before you. Again, this is one of the things which the Jews absolutely did not accept. They said that we are going to believe only what was revealed to us. Whatever is revealed to us is what we are going to believe in, not what is before us or after us. So you see, again, this is something which was there. And then lastly, it is said that believers, they have firm conviction in the hereafter. Look at what the Jews would believe. They would say that they are the chosen people. Yes, if there is going to be a hereafter, and yes, if they are going to go there, then they have been already forgiven in this world because they are the chosen ummah, and as far as the hereafter is concerned, they are successful already in this world. So you see, each and every sentence of this first paragraph, although on the surface it's speaking about the attributes of the believers and telling us that, look, this is the type of people who are going to accept faith. But in reality, the way these attributes are mentioned, they are a very, very subtle slant on what the Jews would believe or not believe in. So now we come to the next part, and you'll see that the next part again is linked in a certain way. And let me just clarify that as far as the certain way is concerned, verses 6 to 7 and verses 8 to 16, they are different from one another. And let me tell you how this difference is going to make itself apparent in the text of the Quran. But let's first read the translation of verses 6 and 7. On the other hand, those who have decided to reject this book, it is the same to them whether you warn them or not. They will not believe. God has now set a seal on their hearts and on their ears in accordance with His law. And on their eyes is a veil, and on the day of judgment a great torment awaits them. So this is one category of the adversaries of the Prophet Muhammad, which were found amongst the idolaters and the Jews. So you see, as far as the idolaters and Jews are concerned, both of them had one category, and that was people who had now decided to believe. As you can see, the words in Arabic are "Inna lazina kafaru." Indeed, people who have decided to deny, who have decided to reject this book, it is the same whether you warn them or not, they are not going to believe. And because of this attitude, God has put a seal on their hearts, and this law is the law of guidance which is mentioned here, and that is that as far as this law is concerned, people who do not value and honor the innate guidance which is given to them, the guidance which is inborn, and they deliberately deny that guidance and also deliberately deny any guidance which is revealed outside of that, which is of course the revealed guidance, then as a punishment, God sets a seal on their hearts, on their eyes, and on their faculties, so that they are not able to understand. So we have to understand this concept as well, that the first category of people, which again, without addressing them, is first put forth before the Prophet, is that there are people who have decided to deny. So the Prophet is actually being assured. He is being told that, look here, if people are not accepting faith, if it's not that you are falling short in your responsibility, because you see, the Prophet, being a very, very conscientious person, he would think that, well, maybe something is amiss, maybe he's falling short in his preaching endeavor, and that is why people are not accepting faith. But the Almighty here is actually impressing upon the Prophet, it's not your fault, dear Prophet, it's not you who are falling short, it is they who I have decided to punish, that now they are not accepting faith because out of their own free will, they decided to reject, and they knew the truth, and in spite of that, they deliberately decided to reject. So therefore, as a punishment, I have sealed their heart, and I have sealed their faculties so that they no longer are able to accept faith. So this is like a punishment which the Quran mentions. And you see, one thing that becomes evident here is that how human the Prophet was. Subhanallah. I mean, look at the fact that he was so perturbed that his people were not accepting faith. And instead of finding fault in people, as a conscientious person would do, he thought that maybe something is wrong on his side. Maybe there is something which he is not doing, and that is why people are not accepting faith. So the verse immediately, and these verses, I would say, they are a means to indirectly assure the Prophet that, look here, you have done your task, you have done your due, and look that these people who are professing faith in front of you, people who are saying that we believe in God and other realities without being asked to see them, and who have conviction in the hereafter, look at these people. And when you look at these people, you'll realize that you're not falling short, because had you been falling short, this would have been the result everywhere. Whereas you find a good category of people, a vast category of people accepting faith. So it's basically an assurance given to the Prophet by telling them that this is going to happen, and this has happened, that if these people are not accepting faith, it's not your fault. It is their fault because God is punishing them for what they have done. Now, this is the first category of people. The next verses, which are verses 8 to 16, and that is precisely why I've colored them in a different way, they present another category of people which are like the hypocrites, who wanted to strike a compromise between Islam and, of course, whatever was not Islam, and they wanted that there should be some reconciliation so that their own religion would also be accepted and Islam would also be accepted. And the formula that they presented was, well, we would accept Muhammad as a prophet, but not for us, for you. So we accept him as a prophet, and he is a prophet for the Muslims and for the believers, but why do you insist that we also believe him as a prophet of God? So this was the ploy that they wanted to actually present. The Quran did not accept it, and it exposed them. But then, as I said, this was something that we have to once again gauge from the text. So let me read the translation of the text before you. So remember, we finished the first paragraph, we asked about the second paragraph, and seen that how the second paragraph actually relates to the die-hard disbelievers. The next paragraph talks about the less diehards, or the people who wanted to strike a compromise. And the translation goes like this: and among these people are those hypocrites also who say, we have professed faith in God and in the last day, whereas they do not have faith in any of these things. So remember, they said that, well, if it is accepting faith that you are asking us, we are accepting faith, we are accepting God, we are accepting the hereafter, and that is all. Why do you want us to believe in the Prophet as well? Now, this is what they would say, and they would try to give this impression that we are believing. And in this way, they would try to deceive. It was a deception on their part, because they would say that we have believed, whereas the belief here meant that they should not only believe in God and the hereafter, but also in the Prophet. So precisely why the next verse says, they want to deceive both God and the believers, and in reality they are only deceiving themselves, but realize it not. In their hearts was the ailment of jealousy. So God has now further increased this ailment of theirs. And because they have been lying, there is a grievous penalty for them. And when it is said to them, do not create disorder in the land by adopting this attitude, they reply, it is we, in fact, who are the reformers. Beware, they are the ones who create disorder, but are not realizing it. And when it is said to them, accept faith as these people in front of you have accepted faith, they very conceitedly say, shall we accept faith as these fools accepted faith? So look at the harsh words they are using. Shall we accept faith as these fools accepted faith? Listen, they themselves are fools, but they know not. And when they meet the believers, they say, "We have believed." But when they reach their evil ones in seclusion, they say, "We are with you. We were only jesting." How can they jest? In reality, God is jesting with them, and according to His law, is giving them respite in their rebelliousness, such that they are wandering about. It is they who have been given preference to error, who have given preference to error over guidance. So this deal of theirs has yielded absolutely no profit for them, and neither have they been able to find the way. So this again is a picture of the second category, as I just said. So there was a category amongst them who wanted a compromise between Islam and their own beliefs, and they said that, well, we believe in the last day, believe in God, and what else would you like to believe? And they would try to give this impression that they are believers, but the Quran says that this belief is not acceptable, and if you would like to accept religion, then you have to believe in the Prophet as well, because he is going to give you, he is the person who is giving you the last message. And the ploy they would adopt would be that, look, that we are trying to reform, we are trying to strike a compromise, and we are reformers. Innama nahnu muslihun. And the Quran says this is no Islah, this is no reformation. If you think that you can believe in your Prophet and the Muslims can believe in their Prophet, this is not an issue of compromise. This is a place in which they will have to yield, and if they don't yield, then they'll have to face punishment, because they are convinced of the fact that the Prophet is a true Prophet. So now you can ask questions, but just let me recap that right after the first paragraph, the second and the third paragraph actually deal with two categories of people. One, people who have decided to deny, they are leaders, they are the diehards found amongst both the idolaters and the people of Medina, which are the Jews. And the second category is amongst those who still want that there should be some compromise, and maybe if their own religion is also accepted, then instead of having all this altercation, all this huge conflict, they can settle for a compromising formula. Yes, please. Now you can ask questions that might have come to your mind.
Thank you, Dr. Saab, for your explanation. My question is about the qualities of the muttaqeen that you said, yuminuna bil ghaibi wa yuqimuna salata and mimma razaqnahum yunfiqun. And you said that it is in comparison to the Bani Israel, but it is also in comparison to the non-believers, the polytheists, the Christians. Like, all of them do not do any of these things. Are we making that connection because we want to correlate the first 40 surah ayahs with the next one? Like, is that why, or is it like?
No, you see, you'll find that, for example, the idolaters never had this. I mean, they did not. They never asked that they would like to believe in God unless they saw God. They actually believed in multiple gods. So you'll find that if you rule out the other, I mean, there were three denominations in front of the Prophet who were denying him. One were the idolaters, the other were the Jews, and the third were the Christians. So if you look at the idolaters, they had different things. I mean, yuminuna bil ghaib was not their problem. They believed in God. They never wanted that God be shown to them. The only thing was that they believed in multiple gods. So this slant or this subtle comparison would not hold for them, I would say. And you can go on. I mean, for example, it says, yuminuna bima unzila ilayka wa ma unzila min qablik. So it was the Jews who, because the idolaters, they never had a book before them. I mean, the only book that they had was the scripture of Abraham, which had been lost to posterity. And for 2,000 years, they were without any book. They just had oral guidance. So you see, if you break up each of these sentences, you realize that the idolaters cannot be, they cannot be implied here. And secondly, as I said, I mean, the Prophet had come to Medina, and there was a small chunk of those idolaters which were based there in the form of the Aus and the Khazraj tribes, and they are already addressed later on, as we shall see in verse 21. So I think if you just stay close to the words of the Quran, which is one of the most fundamental things that I have learned from my teachers, that the Farahi approach, it is all about staying close to the words of the Quran and also understand how eloquence in these words and how the subtlety of these words has an effect, a telling effect on the interpretation of a sentence.
Yeah, so basically it is addressed in relation to Bani Israel because the audience is the Medina, and in Medina it's mostly the Bani Israel. So it cannot be the Christians.
And not
because
only
we're
that,
talking about the people.
not only not only that, the qualities which are mentioned, I mean, the comparison cannot be made with the idolaters, as I said. I mean, they never said yu'minuna bil ghayb was not a problem for them. They already believed in God. In fact, they believed in more than one God. The Jews, they said that if you see in Surah Baqarah, a little down, like I think it's coming down in some of the next sessions, that they said, Arina Allah jahratan. We would like to see God face to face in order to believe Him. So this was never the demand of the idolaters. So as you move along, you'll find out that these qualities, they have this very, very subtle slant, and this is in comparison. So again, as I said, the build-up is going very strong. The Quran is not at the moment tackling them by addressing them. It's just sort of bypassing them, addressing the Prophet or the Muslims and telling them, and at the same time slanting towards them. And as we reach verse 40, which will we do probably in our next session, you'll find that that slant has suddenly turned into a direct address. And this you'll find in a lot of literary pieces of art and work that we have in our human plane as well. That things are done indirectly, very subtly, and then suddenly you'll find things being addressed directly. So this is like a build-up in progress, I would say.
Many thanks, thank you very much. Very good explanation.
Next question is from Riyaz Sahab. Please go ahead, sir.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Sahab.
Wa alaikum assalam.
I mean, from the discussion, I understand that, it seems there are different type of taqwa. So for example, what is the taqwa difference, for example, between Hazrat Umar and Abu Jahl? Do they have the same type of taqwa in the beginning and then Hazrat Umar changed to?
No. Taqwa is an attitude. I was talking about the word guidance. When you say that it is guidance for the pious, does that mean that the Quran is only needed by the pious? Because if people are not pious, then the Quran has no use for them. So I was addressing that question, that the word guidance is not always, it's not always about the original guidance. It's also guidance to become a person who is already a righteous person, to stay a righteous person, to stay on that path. So it's the word guidance that was under discussion.
So the taqwa is same type, are we saying?
Taqwa is an attitude. Basically, you see, Muslim or not Muslim, that's another discussion. Basically, it's an attitude to abide by the limits of God. So the word taqwa basically means to have an attitude which is confined, which always respects the limits which are prescribed by God. This is what taqwa is. What I was trying to explain was that when we say that the Quran is a guidance for the muttaqeen, wouldn't that preclude the fact that people who are not pious, the Quran is not guidance for them, which would be a huge thing. So we would be actually telling people that, well, unless you are muttaqi, you will not be guided by the Quran. So I was trying to explain this and telling you that, you see, the word guidance doesn't mean the original guidance as we understand. It's not that we are asking God for guidance for the first time. The Quran has several examples in it which tells us that the word guidance is also used for that type of guidance which is required to stay on the right path, to remain a person who is God-fearing.
For example, in the Quran it says, فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا. So that taqwa is in every person?
Of course, that basic taqwa is found in every single person, because this is what the Quran has said. فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا تَقْوَاهَا, that every soul has been inspired by good and evil.
Okay, so the other form of taqwa is also there. That means once you become the believer, then you still have to go on further.
Of course, yes. You see that in Surah Shams, where these words occur, the word taqwa refers to the basic guidance of what righteousness is, what morality is. And taqwa, as you can see, has other stages as well. Once you are able to find that, once you are able to gauge that, the next step is to follow and to abide by the limits which are inspired in your soul.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Many thanks. Uzair, you're ahead. Please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, Doctor.
Walaikum salam.
Doctor, my question is regarding this ayah which refers to the claim of munafiqeen that they say that innama nahnu muslihun. And if their claim was based on the position that we accept our religion and you accept, or the Muslim should accept this the Prophet, isn't it the same position which in Surah Al Imran is referred to as, where Allah Ta'ala says, "Kul ya ahlul kitabi ta'alu ila kalamatin sawa'un bainana wa bainakum la na'budu illa Allah wa la nushriku bihi."
No, that's a different thing. So that common platform was the platform of Tawheed in monotheism. Ta'ala ila kalimatin sawa'in bainana. That kalima, what is that kalima? It is the kalima of Tawheed. So the people of the book also believed in Tawheed, and of course Muslims also believe in Tawheed. So the Quran is actually telling them that come back to Tawheed, our basic belief, and let's not indulge in disbelief by doing shirk or by being polytheistic. So that's a totally different thing. That's the commonality which all Abrahamic faiths have, that they believe in one God. Here, this is an entirely different thing. The prophethood of Muhammad is being discussed. They would give this impression that yes, we are believers, and we believe in God, we believe in the hereafter, and that is fine. Why would you like to force us to believe in your prophet as well? So this is a different sort of faith which is being mentioned here.
Right. Also, in terms of the explanation of their claim of being Muslimun, you said that it was their claim because they were they said so that we believe in our prophet and you believe in your prophet. So
Yes.
this view is this view derived from this text, the context of this surah, or it is derived from riwayat or any other?
No, it's directly. You can see it from the text, you see. When they said we have professed faith in God in the last day, whereas they do not have faith in any of these things. Look what the comment of God is, that when they are saying that we believe in God and we believe in the last day, إِذَا لَقُوا الَّذِينَ قَالُوا آمَنَّا, which they would, they say that we professed faith, we professed faith in God, we professed faith in the hereafter. The Quran has actually commented on that by saying that do not have faith in any of these things, and you are actually trying to deceive God by telling these Muslims that, well, we are believing in God in the last day. The fact is that you neither believe in God the way He should be believed, you don't believe in the hereafter the way the hereafter should be believed, and above all, you're not even accepting the person who is bringing this message to you. Although this is not said in words, but you see, the comment of the Quran tells us that this belief is not acceptable. When you merely believing in God and merely believing in the hereafter is not acceptable. So you see, this is something which is a insinuation, something which is implied in the text.
Right. So is the ayah 9 and ayah 10 after ayah 8, are these ayat jumla mutreza, or like in ayah 8 it says that man yaqulu amanna billahi wa bil yawmil akhir wa ma hum bimu'minin. Then there are ayah 9 which says yukhadi'un Allah, then ayah 10 which says fi qulubihim marazun, and then it says wa iza qila lahum la tufsidu fil ardi. So are these two ayahs between surah 8 and 11?
No, they don't. I don't find them to be parenthetical or mutraza in any way. They flow within the text. So this is just a movement of the text, which is what we call the linear movement of the text. It's just the flow of the text, which is taking us from one part of the text to another part. There's nothing parenthetical about it. There is a parenthetical sentence coming up a little later, but there's no parenthetical sense here. You see, the sequence of the discourse is very simple, that they are trying to strike this compromise instead of the previous category of people who had decided to deny. They said that we are going to accept, and as a result, God had put a seal on their hearts. This is what had happened for them. But in this case, they said that, well, we would like to believe in what you say. We believe in God and we believe in the hereafter. But you see, look at the comment which God has made. He says that they are trying to deceive the believers. يُخَادِعُونَ اللَّهَ. They are trying to deceive God, in fact. وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, and the believers, وَمَا يَخْدَعُونَ إِلَّا أَنفُسَهُم. But the fact is that in this deception, what they actually deceive is themselves, is their own selves. They're not successful in deceiving God. So this was a ploy, this was a deception on their part, that they would give this impression that we are believers by telling them that we believe in God and the hereafter, but their belief was incomplete and God did not accept this belief. So this is a direct consequence of the text, which tells us that they would try to give this impression of belief, whereas they would not believe in Prophet Muhammad.
I ask this because apparently I am not able to make a connection between their claim about innama nahnu muslihun connected with man yaqulu amanna billahi wa bil yawmil akhir. I can accept it as it is that they may be claiming just to be Muslimun, but I don't find any explanation or connection of explanation between these two.
You see, the Islah element is that, well, if you accept, if you let us live on our religion and you live on your religion, there would be no conflict. I mean, there would be no point of conflict. We would live peacefully, and therefore this would be like a society in which there would be peaceful coexistence. So we are not asking you to come to our religion or to change yourself and convert to our religion. It is you who are doing so. But if you accept this stance of ours, that we believe in God and we believe in the hereafter, and the rest we don't believe in this way we can coexist. So basically this issue of coexistence is what they call that this is reforming the society. This would end the conflict between them and the Muslims.
Sir, as I understood, whatever has been explained is that the first 5 lines, the people are mu'mineen, the believers, and all their attributes make them the successful people. وَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ, the successful people. And then the next 2 lines, they describe the people who are damned. And then in the next lines, till وَمَا كَانُوا مُهْتَدِينَ, these are for the people who have reduced faith or belief into a business, and hence they can never be regarded as successful, and they never will get the hadayat. وَمَا كَانُوا مُهْتَدِينَ. Is it? Have I understood correctly?
You see, I'm afraid this is not a correct interpretation. You see, the Quran is very specific in its connotation. It's not talking in general about people who are successful or in general people who are decided to deny. There is a certain category of people who are discussed here. And all these categories, they are, found living in the land of Medina at the time of Quran's revelation. So the Quran is talking about specific entities. And that is why when I was teaching the course Understanding the Quran, I had explained this, that when you start reading the Quran and you go deep down and you don't let these words evade you, you stay close to the words, you'll realize that it is talking to a particular audience. And that audience is not all mankind. It is not people like us who are living there. These entities were living entities in Arabia. It's a dialogue between God and these entities. So remember all these things that I taught earlier. And it's not a general guidance that we are obtaining here. It's not that the first 5 verses are talking about all sorts of believers and the next 2 verses are talking about some particular category of people found on earth. So all these verses are situated in the Arabian Peninsula, in the times of the Prophet, for a particular group of addressees. We just cannot generalize it. Each and every word has a very, very subtle insinuation and a very subtle import that has to be granted to it. Look at the words that they had: jealousy. You see, fi qulubihim maradun fazadahumullahu marada. If you study the Quran, you'll find that this maraz which is mentioned is either hypocrisy or this is jealousy. And when it is mentioned in this manner, it is always jealousy. And you'll find the whole of the Quran being rampant wherever it discusses the people of the book, that the Jews were jealous of the fact that why did the last prophet come amongst the Ishmaelites, not the Israelites. So the words which are used in the Quran a little later in Surah Baqarah are hasadan min indi anfusihim. They denied the prophet because they were jealous of the fact that he had come amongst the Ishmaelites. So my request to all of you would be that please concentrate that all of these words of the Quran, they are not general in their import. Yes, we can derive a certain general message from them, but each of these verses and paragraphs, they are situated in 7th century Arabia.
In this word, in the green part of it, there is a word ala abdina. Wa in kuntum fi raybin mimma nazzalna ala abdina. Here, ala abdina also refers to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That it's not just that you are denying or you are in doubt of what I have given to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It is also that I gave it to him that you are in doubt of.
So what exactly is the point that you are making?
So what you said that they were jealous of this fact that why this Quran wasn't sent to one of them, to one of the Jews instead of.
So that's something what I precisely, as I said, that this is a theme of the Quran which is a recurring theme which is found in several other instances of the Quran as well. So the word maraz is used in Arabic, and it is not a general, ailment which is being talked about. It's a spiritual ailment, and this ailment is discussed always in reference to the Jews, because it was they who had not recognized the Prophet simply because he did not come amongst the Israelites.
All right, thank you so much. Next question is from Mubashir. Please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. So my question is, as I asked last time, that the first 5 verses are addressed to the Prophet, and the first 2 verses like Zalikal Kitabul La Rayba Fi. Why these 2 are addressed to the Prophet?
Why they are addressed to the Prophet?
Yes, but what is this essence of telling the Prophet that this is the book of God, and what kind of doubt there is not, it is being talked about that we need to assure the Prophet about something.
So remember, this is another very fascinating aspect of the Quran, that there are certain things which are being talked about while keeping the Prophet before the discourse as an addressee, whereas the message is to be delivered to his adversaries or to his opponents. So when it was being told that this is the book of God and there is no doubt about it, it's not that he was being addressed. It was through him that his adversaries were being told that, look here, this was the book that you were waiting for. Your own scriptures had predicted its arrival, and this is the book of God, and there is absolutely no doubt about that. So it was not that the Prophet had any doubt about the fact it was not a book of God, or that he had any anything which would not be clear in his mind. In fact, it was something that was being addressed to him, and through him the line of communication was once again to his adversaries, and this happens a lot in the Quran.
Right, sir. So my next question is about the verse in Allazina Kafaru. The translation here, it is that who have decided not to accept this. But in other translations like Amin Hassan Islai Tadabbur al-Quran, it is just said that they have not accepted. What is the difference in this translation, and what type of there are words which we can understand that it is in the terms of making a decision or actually making some verb?
So this is a very good question. I think probably you need to once again shift to the course that I taught earlier, which is a course called Understanding the Quran, in which we discussed some of the linguistic aspects of the Quran. And I had explained that the verbs which are used in the Quran, they have certain grades. Like, for example, at times the verb is used for the purpose of expressing intention. At times a verb is used to express intensity, and at times a verb is used to express a decision. So these are all stages of the same single word, and it is the context which tells us whether the verb is being used in one sense or the other. In this particular set of verses, the sense here is that the Almighty has set a seal on their hearts. He is not allowing them to accept faith. This only happens in the Quran, if you read other parallel verses, when a person has decided to deny in spite of knowing and deliberately deliberately denying what he accepts mentally. So the fact that the nature of the punishment is such that the Almighty has said that they are not going to accept faith, it tells us that the crime that they committed was not a simple crime of denying. In fact, it was a crime of intentionally denying. So when we say that they had decided to deny, it means that they were convinced of the truth, but in spite of that, they had decided to deny, because the punishment which is mentioned later on is only for those who accept a certain reality from their heart and then they deny it from their tongue. So the nature of the punishment which comes later in that set of verses tells us that this denial is not a simple denial. Otherwise, God would not have punished them in this way. For a simple denial, the punishment is always, God gives concession. But when He sets a seal on the hearts of people, it is only when there is an extreme element of rejection in their denial. So that is why the translation which is being done here by Ustaz Ghamidi, you'll find that the verb used is not a simple denial. It's a denial in which they deliberately, purposefully and intentionally denied, and this is expressed by the word that they had decided to deny. They were convinced in their hearts that this is the truth, but because of jealousy, they were bent upon denying it. So basically the seal part tells us that such is the extent of this punishment, that it could only have happened to people who had gone to this extent in their denial.
Right. So from the verse وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَن يَقُولُ, the translation is, and among these people. So it is a subcategory among the people which are under discussion from the previous paragraph. But here they say we profess faith in God and hereafter. So is that saying that the category already discussed, they do not profess to these two things?
No. They are the people who had, regardless of what these people are saying, they had decided to deny. They had decided to deny the Prophet and the book which was in front of them. When it says وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَن يَقُولُ مَنْ آمَنَ بِاللَّهِ وَبِالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ, it only means that amongst these rejectors, there is another category of rejectors, and they are such and such. So when it says وَمِنَ النَّاسِ, it says amongst these rejectors, amongst these disbelievers, there is another category. This is a different category. So that was a hardcore category earlier on, and this is like a category who wanted a reconciliation or a compromise between the Prophet and Judaism.
Right. So in the my last question is وَإِذَا خَلَوْا إِلَى شَيَاطِينِهِمْ. So here the shayateen word has been translated as it is in the translation of Urdu. So what does that exactly mean? And the translation does not convey the crux of that word.
Right. So you see, this is something that we use in the Urdu language, but this is peculiar to the English language, and that is why it is not being translated as Satan in the English language. It refers to their leaders. It refers to their chieftains, to their diehard leaders, because this is what they would do. وَإِذَا خَلَوْا إِلَى شَيَاطِينِهِمْ, where they would meet them in seclusion. Because you see, look at the extent of rebuke that they would face. They would tell him when they would go back that, look, you went to these Muslims and you said that we believe in God and the hereafter, we believe in your faith. So this was the rebuke or the anger which the leaders would express. And as a result, they would reply to them, well, we did not say that we believed in God. All that we said was that we believe in, we didn't believe in the Prophet, we believe in God and the hereafter. And when we said that we believe in what you believe, we were only making fun of them. We were only jesting. So this dialogue would only have taken place between the commoners and their leaders. If you understand that, the leaders would have scolded them that, why did you go to these Muslims and say that we express faith? And their answer would be that, well, we didn't exactly do that. We didn't go and say that we express faith. We were making fun of them. We were just jesting. So this accountability could only have been, taken place by the leaders of the disbelievers. Otherwise, the commoners wouldn't have asked them to do so. So the context readily suggests that the word shaitan here or shayateen to be precise in the plural, is actually referring to their leaders who would scold them that why do you go there and say these words?
Many thanks, everybody. So far, we don't have any more raised hands, and we still have 19 minutes left. So for my reminder,
so
just tell me the word marada. Is it jealousy? And one more adjective that you used.
Yes, maraz is the word maraz means jealousy. I mean, it actually means ailment. It's the word ailment, as you can see, refers to spiritual ailment. And the way it is used here is it refers to the fact that they are jealous and they have the ailment of jealousy in their hearts.
Right. Many thanks, sir. That's all up to you, sir. You can proceed. Unless we do have Naveed.
Okay.
Naveed, you can ask a question.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम।
वालेकुम अस्सलाम।
डॉक्टर साहब, मेरा सवाल ये है कि ये रूए सुखन छोटे से उसमें अगर चेंज होता है तो एड्रेस ही अलग है और रूए सुखन अलग है, मतलब जिनकी से बात कही जा रही है, तो ये मतलब अच्छा एक पैराग्राफ में भी कई बार चेंज हो जाता है, तो और बाकी जी दूसरे उलमा ने जिस तरह तर्जुमा किया है तो वहां वो मतलब उसको पैराग्राफिक नहीं किया है, तो बड़ा कंफ्यूजन हो जाता है। अगर अल बयान में हम देखें वहां तो फिर भी समझ पाते हैं, लेकिन अगर दूसरी तफसीर या दूसरे तर्जुमे में अगर हम देखें तो बहुत कंफ्यूजन होता है उसमें। तो इसको मतलब किस तरह से एक आम आदमी कनेक्ट कर पाएगा उसको?
As I said, I mean, you have to be, you have to remain close to the words of the Quran. You have to do justice in their translation. You have to look at the context. You have to look at the larger context of the surah as well. I mean, this is a practice that you've just begun. It will take some time. So bear with me. Go along with these discussions, and inshallah, hopefully, you'll get trained for this purpose.
Inshallah.
Okay, so now let's complete our today's text by going on to verses 17 and 20. So you can see I've written step 2 on them, and the reason for that is that as you proceed in the Quran, you'll find the Prophet being addressed initially and being consoled that look, it's not your fault that these people are not accepting faith. It's basically their own, it's their own doing that they are not accepting faith. And you have two categories before you. There are people who have decided to deny, and there's another category who's trying to strike a compromise. We have come to this extent by now. Now the next paragraph actually describes a parable of both these groups. If you look at the blue part, it describes the parable or example of the first group, which is the diehards, and the mauve color, which starts off right after the blue one. It is a parable of the people who wanted to strike a compromise. So you see, this is how the Quran is proceeding. I mean, it starts off with the assurance to the Prophet, and then it goes on to tell him that look, this is how you'll find one category of people, and then the Quran says this is another category of people. And to further elaborate on this, the Almighty says that if you would like to further understand these people, now look here, I'm going to narrate before you a parable, a similitude, which is called tamsil in Arabic. And look at the first tamsil, which is actually of the first group. It says, their example is similar to that person who kindled a large fire in a dark night. Then, when the fire lighted his surroundings, God took away the light for those whom the fire had been kindled, and left them in darkness such that they cannot see anything, deaf, dumb, and blind. Hence they shall now never return. So this is the parable of the people who had decided to deny, who were the people that they wanted, that they, in spite of the fact that they were given the light of the Quran, and the parable actually here is referring to Prophet Muhammad when he says that look at the person who kindled a large fire in the dark night. The dark night, of course, is the desolate Jahiliyyah period of the times of the Quran, and the light is referring to the Quran. So the Quran was revealed on the Prophet. It actually kindled the whole atmosphere, which is bleak and dark, and people could have benefited from this light, but they did not. And when they did not, God took away their eyesight. As a result, remember the words earlier on. It was said that the seal was put on their hearts, and they are not going to accept. So their example is being extended here. that the Quran, which was like a light, was revealed to a person, and then that person presented that light before you, and instead of benefiting from that light, look what you did. You shut your eyes, you denied that light, and as a result, God took away that light, and the fire that was kindled, it was of no use for them. And then this very harsh verse, Summum bukmun umyun fahum la yarji'un, deaf, dumb and blind. And these are deaf, dumb and blind people. They have decided to deny, they have shut off their eyes, and they will never return. So this again is a form of assurance given to the Prophet that he's not falling short. It is these people who have shut off their eyes. And remember, we had that second group which said that, well, there is a compromise that we can strike between our religion and your religion. Now comes their parable, their tamsil. And it says, or is such that it is raining from the sky. In it are dark clouds and thunder and lightning also. From the fear of death because of thunder, they are trying to insert their fingers in their ears, whereas God has encompassed such rejectors from all sides. The lightning all but snatches away their sight. When it lights up on them, they walk a little in it. And when darkness descends upon them, they stand still. If God willed, He could have taken away their hearing and sight as well. Indeed, God has power over all things. Now, reflect on each and every sentence carefully. Look at the words which have been used as translation. You'll find a very, very clear difference amongst this group of people, or this particular category of people, that they are the people who actually would like them to, they are the ones who would like people to understand that, well, if we can find some light, if we are able to grope our way through this thunder and lightning, which of course refers to the inzar of the Quran, to the let's say the warnings of the Quran. When they hear these warnings, what do? They insert fingers in their ears, and they would say, well, we just would not like to listen to it. And when there's a light in the atmosphere in which there is some respite from that lightning and thunder, they start walking. So this is a very beautiful picture of that compromise that they're wanting to strike. On the one hand, they are very afraid. They insert their fingers from those warnings. And on the other hand, whenever there is light but no thunder, they try to wade their way through the darkness so that they could go somewhere. And look at the ending verses where and the ending part where it is said that وَلَوْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ لَذَهَبَ بِسَمْعِهِمْ وَأَبْصَارِهِمْ وَسَمْعِهِمْ, that had God wanted, He could have taken away their eyesight the way He did of the previous people, but He did not, because they are still in that limbo, that period of limbo in which there could be a possibility that they might accept faith. So they are given this chance, they are given this you can say respite, the period of respite in which they can come forward and maybe accept faith. And precisely that is why it is said that they are given this opportunity. I'm just going to read out a small paragraph from my translation of Ustaz Ghamidi's Al-Bayan, so that you can see how he has related these two parables to those two categories of people. So let me first read out his translation, which tells about the first category of people. He writes that this similitude is that of a caravan which is trying to find its way in a dark night. So it's like a caravan, a procession of people. The person who is referred to is the one who lights up the fire, is Prophet Muhammad. In other words, it was he who illuminated the whole path of lighting a fire. But since the people of the caravan are deaf and blind and dumb, they cannot hear the calls of the caller. Neither can they answer him, nor can they find a way in the lit up fire around them. So again, the same picture. And then the second tamsil, or the second similitude, is again related to him, to the second category of people, and that is the second similitude is of a caravan which in the dark of night has been caught somewhere in the rain. Remember, the words which reflect this rain are found in the original Arabic text as well. The rain refers to the Quran, and the words dark clouds are meant to allude to the hardships which a person would inevitably encounter in those times in case he accepted the message of the Quran. By lightning and thunder are meant to be those warnings the Quran sounded to its rejectors, which at that time refer to the Jews in particular. So you see, the next two paragraphs, or the single paragraph, as you can see in these two colors, actually further demonstrates the fact that these people, O Prophet, you should not be in any sort of bother that if they are not accepting faith and it is because of your doing or you're not doing enough. That is not the case. They are people who are either trying to strike a compromise or they have decided to deny. And if you would like to have a further explanation of how they are behaving, look at this parable. So this parable, as I said, these are in fact two parables. One of them describes the first category and the second parable describes the second category. Now, up till here, you can clearly see, look at the flow of these paragraphs. You see, when you see the Quran progressing in the form of paragraphs, in the form of the addressees being switched from one to the other, and at the same time, at times, the direction of address is not necessarily towards the entity which is being addressed, but at times the slant is towards another group of people. You will find this beauty of the Quran pervading its whole structure. And this back and forth address of the Quran and then going back to a particular addressee and then moving forward is like connecting the whole sequence in a way that you understand this flow of the Quran. And if you're not able to make sense of this flow of the Quran, you will find a strange disconnection, and you'll find that look at this, this discourse seemingly tells us that there are people who would accept faith, there are people who would deny faith, and then suddenly we find a parable. Where has that parable come from? So this parable is not it's not a haphazard appearance that has been made suddenly in the text of the Quran. No, this parable is actually reflecting right back on the two categories. And as I said earlier on, that this parable is actually two parables. So these two parables, they are not moving forward. They are not sort of progressing the discourse of the Quran in the forward direction. They take the Quran backwards. So there are two categories of people discussed, and then the next two paragraphs or the next paragraph is going backwards and explaining these two categories of people. Now, once this is finished, the Quran then moves forward. So you see how different this is to the way that we would write a book. That things that go forward and then they go backward. But if you understand this forward and backward movement, you will understand also why these haphazard, so to speak, jumps or these disconnections, which if we don't account for these words, would make us feel as if the Quran is speaking out of its own fancy and there's no connection. But if we are able to gauge the fact that each and every paragraph moves in a particular direction, at times forward and at times backwards, and as we shall see in some of the later paragraphs, that it also moves tangentially, sideways, so to speak, and then it comes back to its original discourse, it is only then we will start to begin and realize the beauty of the divine word. So in the last these minutes that we have before we close our today's topic, if there are any questions regarding what we have just studied, please feel free to ask them.
Sir, there is a question regarding our way of study, the Nazm al-Quran. And the question is, Nazm al-Quran, Quran की आफाकियत को मुतासिर करता है, जैसा मौलाना ज़कीर रहमान साहब ने कहा. आपकी क्या राय है?
I mean, the fact that the Quran is a universal book, where is that written in the Quran? I mean, this is a human construct. We find this sentence to be spoken, and it is like a cliche. It's like a commonplace remark that the Quran is a universal book. Do we find this? Does the Quran say that it's a universal book? I think what the Quran says is that it has a universal message for all of us. But the fact that its universality is based on each and every verse, this is not what it says for itself. This is something which has become very famous. I mean, this is a very popular misconception. So the universality of the Quran is in its message, but as far as the text is concerned, it is extremely localized. Otherwise, you see the people who would think that this is not so, they should come up and then answer certain questions which arise from within the text.
Thank you, sir. We have 4 minutes left. We need to be precise and concise with our questions and answers. Bisma, please go ahead.
So my question, Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Saleem. My question is, so while it's telling it's referring to one set of people, which is the Jews, in the same sentence, it's referring to another set of people? Is that what? So you mean to say it's telling two stories at the same time? Is that what is implied when you then?
No, that's not what I'm saying. What actually I'm saying is that at times the Prophet is being assured, but the way in which he's being assured is that there is a slant and there's a message for his opponents as well. As Mubashir asked earlier on, that when the Quran says that there is absolutely no doubt about it being from God, so why would the Prophet be needed to told this? Because he already believed in the Quran. So I actually I actually explained to him and I said that, look, although the Prophet is being addressed, but the fact that it is being said that there is no doubt that this is the book of God that you are waiting for, although the Prophet is, on the forefront, but actually the message is meant to be delivered to his adversaries, because they were waiting for a book. The Jews, they were waiting for a book, and when it has arrived, they are making all sorts of objections on it. So what I was telling on that occasion was that at times a particular entity is addressed, but the message is meant for another entity, like for example the adversaries.
Okay, so basically in our terms, it's like जब आप किसी, like for want of a better word, जब किसी को कोई सुनाता है, when people are addressing one set of,
right.
So when you're standing in a conversation. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah, you would like to actually convey your point to someone else, but you're addressing someone else.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Uzair, please go ahead.
Right, Dr. Saab, my question regarding the second parable, does it signify a state of confusion on the part of the second group? And also one clarification, is the second group that is being referred to here, is it the same munafiqeen who were apparently Muslims, but in their heart they were not Muslims?
So first thing that I would clarify here is that the munafiqun which are discussed here are not the ones that we are generally aware of, that they would be, different in their own inner self, and outwardly they would express to be Muslims, and inwardly they would not be Muslims. Because you see, these are the people who openly express that we would not accept. How would we accept faith like these fools would accept faith? When they would ask to be accept faith, they would say that Kama amana sufaha, would we accept faith like these fools? So the typical munafiqun would not say these words. So the munafiqun which are being discussed here is another category of munafiqun, which refers to actually those munafiqun who would try to deceive Muslims by telling them that they accepted faith, whereas they would actually play on words. They would say that yes, we accept faith, and they would mean that we accept faith in God and the hereafter, and they would skip faith in Prophet Muhammad. So this is another category of munafiqun, and there are several categories of munafiqun which are mentioned in the Quran. So we have to be prepared to widen our scope of this definition of munafiqun. So the munafiqun that you are talking about, they are also one category, but they are not the ones who are discussed here.
Right, thanks. That makes sense. Regarding the parable implying a state of confusion, is it so?
Yes, it does. You see, when it says that when the lightning lights up, when the darkness gives way to lightning, they start to walk, and when they find nothing to do, they just insert their fingers in their ears. يَجْعَلُونَ أَصَابِعَهُمْ فِي آذَانِهِمْ مِنَ السَّوَائِقِ حَذَرَ الْمَوْتِ. It's like a position of I would not say confusion. It would be as if they are nonplussed. They don't know what to do. They are at times, because they are given this respite, they are able to walk through these warnings. And at other times, when they are warned very severely and they know this is the truth, all that they can do is just evade them like an ostrich does. So if you look closely at this parable and you look at the words, they clearly see that, they clearly show that these are the people who wanted to strike a compromise, but when they see that the warnings of the Quran are so direct and so unequivocal, that they don't find that a compromise would work, and they know that it's not going to work. So it's like just a temporary respite that they are getting.
Many thanks. It was a wonderful session. Thank you everybody for joining us, and my dear teachers, stay blessed and happy always, and we'll see you again. Thank you so much.